Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show, where we try to get behind the amazing innovations that are happening all over the world and talk about the stories and how we tell those stories that get these big ideas to the finish line. And that's why I'm really excited to have with me here today Stefan Dietrich, who is joining me from Siemens, but is here acting today as a private citizen, talking about all the innovations that he has been working on over the course of a long and storied career. And we're going to talk about this shifting culture. How do we get companies, how do we get the organizations that we work on to really begin to see themselves from whatever they are initially, a manufacturing culture, an industrial culture, a consulting culture, and now moving into a technology culture and beginning to see themselves as technology, perhaps as the driving force behind how change happens, and innovation in all of its forms as being at the tip of this spear. So let me introduce you to my friend, Dr. Stefan Dietrich, who has seamlessly transitioned between executive roles in global corporations and leadership positions, even into innovation startups. He leverages the rapid innovation pace typical of startups to benefit large enterprises while simultaneously applying organizational insights and structured approaches from his corporate experiences to support startups in achieving success. In his corporate endeavors, Stefan has designed and implemented several large-scale digital transformation initiatives, and in 2021, he relocated to Europe to join Siemens Switzerland in the Smart Infrastructure CTO office, where he defined and implemented a comprehensive data strategy and accompanying training programs to drive the cultural shift that is essential for Siemens' AI initiatives. Earlier in his career, Stefan successfully developed and executed AXA Technologies' digital workplace transformation, providing AXA with a 2-year competitive advantage and reducing annual operating expenses by 35%. This is no small feat. Stefan, we're going to get into some of your startup background as well, but thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's talk about how you actually got into the world of innovations, because nobody walks in through the front door. How did you get there, Stefan?
Well, it started actually quite early. When I went to school, I grew up with all the Apollo programs still in the making, and as a kid, I saw the moon landing and so on. And well, I was born a little bit later than that, but I still saw the Apollos going off. And so I always wanted to do something really exciting. And I went to school and liked physics and math, and I thought, like, what's the most complicated thing I can do? And I thought, well, rocket science, it must be. So I applied for rocket science here in Germany, and I was actually accepted in Stuttgart, studied aerospace engineering. And so it's really about, like, how do you solve the most complex problems there are? And one of the things that I became really good in was like statistical math. And one of the things that turned out to be a real innovation at the time was like instead of trying to find mathematical formulas to solve a problem, you do Monte Carlo simulations. That basically means it's like instead of like trying to calculate the result, you're just trying to throw a lot of numbers at a problem and see which numbers actually fit. So instead of like having an equation x plus 1 equals 4, instead of like calculating x as 4 minus 1, you just try all numbers and see which one is a good one. That's how Monte Carlo simulations work. So I wrote software around it, algorithms, so aerospace engineering for fluid dynamics, which became a very new trend. And in the 90s, it was kind of a real hype because at the same time, computers became performant enough to be able to do that. Prior to that, there was just not the compute power. But in the 90s, you suddenly had this compute powers. You could just throw all the numbers at it, have a million tries, and see which one of the millions is the best result. So that was very interesting. We used it for re-entry or entry in extraplanetary atmospheres to calculate vehicle paths and so on. So, but you can imagine at the same time, it was kind of interesting. banks and financial institutions started to pick up on this one and said, we want to do the same thing with our market data. We want to throw all kinds of stock market developments into these equations and see what should our trading strategy be. So
Mm.
I started with Deutsche Bank and then with Reuters, doing these market data calculations, historical simulation, Monte Carlo simulation, future prediction, scenario analysis, everything you do there to basically come up with like a prediction of what would be the best strategy. Now, because you're not calculating it exactly, there's not really one strategy that is the absolute correct strategy, but you can say from a million scenarios that you have, here are the 2 or 3 that works best. And that was kind of my intro into innovation. And it was really innovative for big banks because it allowed them to do things they couldn't do before. On the other hand, of course, you can imagine it went up with higher risks. So at the same time, you had to do more risk management, risk calculation, risk assessments, and estimate the risks that you're doing when you do something that you're not quite sure about what you're doing because the computer told you it's the right thing to do.
Wow. So, I mean, how is this received really in the beginning? This kind of analytics, were people surprised by it? Was this uh,
Well, at the beginning, it was a little bit controversial. People didn't
uh,
really know what to make out of it. There were different approaches, how you could do it. There was like the old approach. We keep it with the way it is. We use like a Black-Scholes model. We calculate what's the right pricing and so on. And then there was, of course, the other extreme that was like we do everything very random, and then there was everything in the middle. Like, oh, let's apply a Monte Carlo simulation and do a correlation analysis at the same time to be able to kind of estimate that the Monte Carlo simulation at least is verified with some correlations that we know better. It was kind of interesting. It was kind of an interesting way. And I think even today, the truth is none of them have turned out to be like it fits all scenarios. There's not a
yeah.
lot of experience that has to be dealt with. People have to really understand what they're doing. If you just rely on it blindly, yeah, no, it doesn't work.
So, this in its own right, just the ability to look at data, and and how heavily we rely on data and analytics, right, in business today. That was the beginning of changing the culture, right? It's not to say that we didn't look at numbers before, but we just didn't have them in such abundance as we do today. And I was listening to an interview rather with Yuval Harari. He wrote that famous book *Sapiens*. It's like 1,000 pages if you have the stomach to get through it, but it really is very insightful, and tells the story of the evolution of human history, from our inceptions, really, as civilized people, and even before, even the battle between Cro-Magnon and Homo sapiens, right, and how we became dominant on the planet. But he was saying in this interview that um, that data that there's a quest in the world for truth, but truth is a very expensive thing. It has to be proven, it has to be fact checked, it has to be held up as real, and it has to be criticized and recognized as being unequivocally true. Whereas we have tons of data and we have tons of analysis. Getting to truth is a whole other different ball of wax, but we strive for it every day inside of large organizations, right? We rely more and more heavily on getting to data and analytics to drive business decisions, thinking that this is really the way that the data is always going to tell us the way. And I'm very curious, when you're this deep into it, and you're trying to create an innovation culture that's relying on things that are outside of, what might be one leader's gut, what might be another leader's analytical predilection, right, to rely on the numbers, and another, someone who's a little more visionary, to say, I see trends happening. I'm seeing things taking place that don't necessarily fall within the spectrum of either of these things. That all of these forces really join together to create the innovation culture, right? We have to allow all of these different forces to allow new ideas to come forward. And I'm curious, as you look at the innovations that you've worked on, where do you see the majority in corporate life today? Where are the majority of new ideas of what's taking place coming from? Is it coming from the numbers? Is it coming from, the person with the strongest gut? Is it coming from someone who's just more future oriented than the rest of us?
Yeah, I would say it's of course a little bit it depends answer.
Mm.
One example I wanted to talk about is iPhone introduction I did at AXA. Now, from today's perspective, the iPhone is such a ubiquitous thing that nobody would think that was ever an argument about it. Yeah. But in 2007, that was something that was like, we don't know what this is. We don't know how it will work. We don't know if this is good for corporate. We don't know if it's secure enough. There was all this kind. BlackBerry was the story. Everybody said, we love our BlackBerries. Who would ever use something else in a BlackBerry? Could there ever be something better? Apple, iPhone, consumer device. Um, and you can come with as much data as you want. That wasn't about data at all. That was really about what people's opinion were. And some people had like this strong opinion that BlackBerry is proven security, it must be BlackBerry. And I was sitting there, and for me, it was like, right in front of me, it's like, we need to go this way, you know. But getting this through to the executive, it was really, really tough. They all looked at it. They said, "Nice, it's a toy. It's something for consumers. It's nothing we'll never use in the enterprise. It will not require our security standards, our processes, our software. It will not do this." I mean, I pushed harder and harder. And the more I pushed, the more resistance I got. Yeah, I mean, it ended up with Mike Lazaridis coming to our office with a suitcase. He was the co-CEO of BlackBerry, with a suitcase showing me all the new devices and all the great things that BlackBerry was developing. And they had great stuff. I mean, no doubt about it. I just simply thought the iPhone was better, yeah, or more versatile. I mean, there could be trivial things like a keyboard. Everybody said, oh, the BlackBerry has a physical keyboard. The iPhone doesn't have a physical keyboard, therefore it's not good. Well, yeah, if you think that way, but I'm thinking is like, I want to type in German, I want to type in French, and I need different keyboards to type this most efficiently. I cannot change my keyboard on the BlackBerry, but on the iPhone, I always get the keyboard that is suitable. And I mean, it went on and on and on, and then finally it came to like a really head stop with like very senior executive. It went to the board, and then it was basically decided we cut this in half. We're not going all the way iPhone, but we allow iPhone, and we do the other half with BlackBerry, and then we see how it goes. And it went really quick. Within 3 years, there was basically no BlackBerry left, and within like 5 years, there was no BlackBerry left.
It's just amazing to me. I was actually doing another interview yesterday, and I can remember lamenting the loss of my keyboard. Like, I love the sensation under my fingers of pushing these buttons somehow. But then, all this other functionality was so intuitive that there's no argument anymore. It's like, who cares about this stupid keyboard when look at all the other amazing things I can do?
Yeah, and then there were things like BlackBerry had a server that had to be at the cell phone provider site, and that you had to buy via subscription. And that was very expensive. When you had an iPhone, you could directly connect to your own infrastructure. You didn't have additional costs. You didn't have a certain man in the middle,
Right.
that needed to be protected. So, but of course, people said, we know BlackBerry, we know how secure it is. We have gone through all the processes. We have passed our compliance checks and so on. Redoing it, of course, comes always with a cost. Change it comes with a cost. It was a lot of of trying to convince people of the obvious, and it really required a cultural shift in the company that had to develop over time. I mean, as much data as you could bring, that was a real example of like just an idea has to slowly grow, and you basically, it's like a plant. You water it and it becomes bigger and bigger, yeah, until it's big enough that nobody can overlook it anymore.
Wow. You know, well, thinking about this, Stefan, and some of the innovations that you've worked on, can you share with us some of the experiences of the innovations you've worked on at AXA and Siemens? And you were in a startup too, right? I mean, like, tell us a little bit about the breakthroughs, right? The innovations that you've worked on, and then I want to hear about all the stories behind these great innovations.
Yeah. So startup. One thing was interesting. I worked with Nouri Rubini, the economist, and he came to me in
Wait, did
when
you
was
say
it?
the communist or the columnist?
No, economist.
Economist, even better.
Economist. Economist.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna have another sip of my coffee, Stefan, and then we'll continue talking.
No, The Economist. Yeah. So that was in 2004. I just came out of Reuters with all my experience in market data and Monte Carlo simulation and so on. And he wanted to develop a new kind of search engine. And it
Mm,
was very interesting. He said, like, we have Google now, but Google is not good because if I say I want to know about IBM stocks and Filipino pesos, it would give me something like with IBM in Mexico. Yeah, it would not really make the association that I'm looking for something specifically in an economical sense, in a macroeconomical sense, and so on that gives me a real answer. It gave me like a keyword search, and then I had to sort through 100 results, of which only two or three would apply to me because I want to do an economic search engine. So we worked on that one. It was it was a very interesting project because the innovation here was like Noria had some really clear idea how he wanted it to work. But that's really not how it works. But if an economist thinks about technology, an economist thinks about it in a very specific way. If a technologist thinks about such a system, I think in about a different way. And so we found ourselves sitting across a table, arguing. I mean, really arguing hard for like hours, 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 until we were so tired that we just basically called it truth and said we continue tomorrow.
wow.
It was really like this. But this is also sometimes how you come to innovation. There's a certain resilience that you need to bring. There's a frustration level you need to deal with. You need to listen very carefully because, Nouriel has guaranteed as many good arguments as I had. And he represents a user view that I probably wasn't too familiar with. And so developing innovation here is, sorry, is sometimes really tough because until you come to something that you agree, and very often it just basically means, okay, we try it. We try it, we test it, we do some user studies, some test groups. We see how the resonance is. We go back to square one, or we continue from there.
Hmm.
It was very interesting. I had a very good CTO for him who came from the gaming development world, who brought very interesting perspective because it was gaming, meaning he was able to deal with a lot of things in milliseconds very fast. But he also knew what user experience meant and what was an acceptable waiting time. When you think, for example, today we do Amazon searches. You go to Amazon, you type in whatever you're looking for, you get an answer to it. I don't think most people realize how much work went into making this answer very swift. Because if you put something in that's very complicated, you are not there sitting there for 30 seconds to wait for Amazon to reply to it. No, they're throwing in more CPUs if it gets complex. So you get your answer always within a second or so to just basically keep you engaged. We had a very much a similar problem there. It was something I didn't really think at the beginning, but when you do a search engine, you need to be always able to, whatever the user wants, to get the best results, but quick. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's like innovation just basically brings up a lot of like issues that you don't even think when you start about it. They basically getting the right results at some point was basically taking a sidelines to like getting the right results as quick as possible. you know.
Mm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was one of the innovations. Another innovation, going back to AXA, um, call centers. Call centers. You know, I got this project assigned to me, and kind of hated my boss for it. It's like, why should I work on call centers? I mean, call centers. I mean, what's in there to solve in call
I can't
centers?
think of a sexier problem, Stefan. What are you
Yeah,
talking
it's
about?
kind of
Bring me
the
a call
most
center
boring
any
thing.
day.
It's like assign me to data center consolidation or something like this.
Oof,
It's
getting hot in here, Stefan. Sure.
yeah, exactly. It was like this, and you know, so I listened to the people, and they said they were not happy with the performance of the call center. We had too many call centers because AXA did so many acquisitions. We wanted to consolidate them. The question was, how should we consolidate them? You know, of course, there were consultants in, you know, from the big firms that made recommendations on saying like, this is the way how you do it, and this way it's most cost optimal. And basically, you put a cost center in Morocco, you put a cost center in the Czech Republic. That was like at that time like the two favorite places to put call centers. It's of course cheap and whatever. But then the business guys were a little bit concerned with high net individuals, you know, should they really talk to somebody in like, say, India, yeah, where typically the call center is, you know, what's the user experience and can we do this better and what do we need to do? So I asked a couple of friends and somebody told me is that TD Ameritrade had a very good call center.
Mm.
So, and he actually helped me set up a visit at the TD Ameritrade call center down in Philadelphia. So we went there, and I took along with me the heads of our call centers just to get a little bit of an idea how they're doing call center over there, because we heard it's very good, and even for high net worth, medium to high net worth individual, there was a lot of positive responses they got. And we went there, and I remember we walked in there, and they had this wall of customer feedback, and it had
Okay.
all these little letters on it, and it said like, I called your 800 number. It was a Sunday, and I left on Monday morning, and I needed something, and your branch manager drove over on a Sunday afternoon to bring me personally, and I was like so impressed that by calling an 800 number, I could get such a reaction. You know, I mean, there were tremendous stories of success. You know, I never talked to somebody that knowledgeable, could help me that quickly, and so on. And our guys looked at it and says, "Yeah, we get these as well. I got at least 10 this year already of those, you know." And there were like 100 letters on the wall. And you know, we were waiting, and then of course somebody comes and they said, "Okay, fine, I'm from TD Ameritrade," and I said, "You have an impressive number of letters here hanging on the wall," and he was like, "Yeah, we replace them every month." And it was whisper quiet.
Oh, wow.
They got more letters in a month than we got in a year. Yeah. It was stunning. And at that moment I saw this click, and I saw how people reacted, and I saw that everybody understood something needs to change. We need to be different. We need to be different how we deal with customers. We need to be different how we do things. And it was very interesting. TD Ameritrade, they hired people from Disney Cruise Lines, you know, because they thought like, this type of industry understands best what customers need, you know. So we realized we had been hiring a lot of tech companies, a lot of tech consultants, you know, to get the best systems in, you know. Maybe that wasn't the right approach. Maybe we needed to go to the hotel industry, you know, and basically learn from there, what does it really mean, customer experience, user experience at just a different level, you know. But that's also sometimes how innovation happens. You start with something, and then something, there's this big click, and you end up with something totally different, you know. At the end of the day, what we did is like, yes, we did the classical Morocco, Czech Republic, India, and so on, but we did additional technology. We did additional high net value call centers, you know, based in America for US clients, based in Germany for German customers, and so on, to just basically satisfy this need for a specific customer support for the problems where we knew customers had something unusual. It was not like a password reset or a standard request. It was more specific claims. They needed a little bit of hand-holding. They needed a little bit of insurance that it will be taken care of, you know. So we implemented it. It turned out to be one of the best projects.
Mm.
I was quite surprised with myself, you know. It was a lot of fun at the end, you know.
Wow. Yeah. Who would have thought, right? So I think the message for me is, as I'm listening to you, is there's innovation to be found pretty much anywhere you look, right? If we develop a culture of innovation inside of an organization, we can find ways to make things better all the time. The question is, do our leaders and our managers want to take the effort to make these shifts in the midst of, what feels like a very tenuous quarter, or, like, wow, everything. I talked to an organization, an insurance organization, that said, our biggest challenge is that everything is going great right now. And so everyone is fat and happy. Nobody wants to take risks because we know what it feels like when we take risks. And I got to say, I think like the larger corporate nervous system, right, is pretty much been on high alert for a good long time. Ever since COVID, there's been so much volatility and uncertainty that it's challenging for people to take the risk. And I know, having this podcast now, almost 200 episodes, so many amazing innovators have been on the show, but I've also know how many people have come back and said, yeah, my company decided to shut down the innovation function, or it's distributing the innovation function across business units, right? And suddenly, we saw Walmart's incubator shutdown of new ideas. Google decided to shut down its, in-house incubator, and they said, we're going to distribute this kind of new innovation thinking around the organization. It's challenging to keep the innovation spark going. And sometimes a culture that becomes risk averse over time. So having worked in the insurance space, this is a long buildup, but having worked in the insurance space, it's a company that manages risk every single day. I just had the head of risk management innovation from AXA on the show, and we were talking about, how do we get people to still continue to think about innovation, even when either you're very happy or you're in the midst of great volatility. Have you had
Yeah.
experiences with that, Stefan? Even thinking about mergers and acquisitions, right? Startups that you're working with, new companies that you want to bring on. There's always like this big sense of fear around the work that we do, right?
There's always a big sense of fear. Yeah. I think, especially in the insurance industry, it has to do with just simply how the revenue numbers come in.
It
There's
all comes
certain,
down to this, right? This is
yeah,
this is an indicator of your EKG, right? If you go to the doctor and you're checking vital signs, it's like,
yeah,
how's revenue doing? How's our people issues doing? Right? These are the vital signs of an organization.
yeah. I mean, at AXA, because AXA was a company that's basically built by buying other insurance companies, and the most interesting experiences I had there when it comes to the insurance business was the AXA Art Insurance. There are very few art insurances in the world. Chubb is another one that's big in art. It's a very specific business. You insure art for museums, you insure art for private collectors and so on. And you can imagine it's super high value. Yeah, it's a super profitable business at some point. AXA Eccles, the church insurance. Yeah, they only insure churches. There are not many people out there. Yeah, you can basically you charge a premium. Your risks are pretty modest. You can manage it. Artwork, you have to think about how you protect it and how much security is around it and so on. But it's all a business that is basically a running business that is pretty controllable. When you have other insurances, like say a car insurance, a property insurance, like a commodity insurance type thing, your profit margins are very slim. Anybody that comes with an innovation wins. We had these things about property insurance in Japan, like how can we make insurance signatures faster, like introduction of iPad so you could sign online, yeah, was a big deal there, because we needed to get the paperwork out of the process. We needed to make it faster. When your profit margins are relatively small, you're driven by faster innovation. You're driven by more risk tolerance. You're driven by like we need to just get it done. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and there are the couple of these drivers. Once you get your vital signs taken care of, right? There's um, everything's good, so we can innovate. Or, oh my God, the competition is eating our lunch. Who are we going to acquire? What are we going to build in house? Right? There's the fear-driven innovation too. Can you tell us a little bit about the approaches that you've seen that have worked in larger organizations with innovation? I hear from very established companies that they take a portfolio driven approach where they say we're going to allocate, 20% of our portfolio to moonshot high risk ideas. And the rest is going to be, incremental innovation on the product lines we already have, and maybe stepping out on some extensions, or exploring new things that are going on in other markets. We're going to allocate some money in there. But how do you think about the structures around innovation in the companies you've worked at?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Siemens, because this portfolio concept is like something that has been very typical for Siemens. Siemens
Mm.
in the past, Siemens is, when you work there, it's an industrial powerhouse. You really know it's 120 something years of in existence. It's an old company. Um, it has done great things. It's of course known for electrical components, electrical system, power grids, you name it. To like areas that I'm working in, that is more like a mix of, we call it smart infrastructure, a mix of like electrical car charging, electrical products, building systems, you name it. It's very broad.
Hmm.
In the past, it has been basically, um, we call it like a fleet of portfolios, different products that belong together, that are owned by Siemens, that go one way and are performing really well in the market. But now, what we're seeing is it also leads to a lot of inefficiency when you go this approach. Yes, you can spawn off your separate like high risk product and you can try it. You can launch a product, you can launch a portfolio. You can say it's like let's have these 3, 4 high risk acquisitions. That's 3, 4 innovation projects. Let them launch and let them run parallel to our main core business. But in Siemens, we're looking at like the big tech companies, and we're seeing like how good they are in innovation, how good they are in basically um, uh, innovate and grow exceptionally fast. How they basically can scale incredibly well. You know, so there's now a new initiative out there. It's called like Siemens becoming one tech company. So we're trying to basically bring everything together and make it like one big tech company, to come to this route of more scaling, uh, selling more things together. Because you see, when you're in a portfolio approach, you have a lot of sales teams. Everybody is selling what they belong to. A lot of parallel activity, a lot of duplication of work. How nice would it be if everything would fit together and everything can be sold together? You have a much better way of cross and upselling items, and basically that way get the revenue you want out of it, and and achieve the growth you want. And it's also better for customers, because if customers have to go through 3 or 4 sales team to like basically solve their problem, instead of going to one person that basically says, here is your solution, it comes from our one tech company. That's a very different approach. You can still run your innovation activities maybe a little bit separate of this if you just want to try something. But I think
Yeah.
right now we see everywhere, and it's not just Siemens. I spoke to the CDO of Schneider the other day, and they're also on this path of thinking it's like we need to rein things a little bit in. It has spread out too far. We need to come back to like one core company, one core competency, one core value offering for the customers. I mean, we all see like how Microsoft, Google, AWS, all the big tech companies, how they're evolving and how they're putting things together and how fast they can do it and how well it scales. And that's where we really need to get to. And that's an innovation by itself.
It's true. Yeah. And so, thinking about this last piece is, even with this story, with a portfolio approach or whether your company takes a different one, the stories that we tell in, at the boardroom table to get our big ideas approved, we still need to hone these skills, right? I mean, I can't think of how many technologists have kind of like come into a room with an executive and say, I have this brilliant idea, and then dives into the minutia of the concept or the idea that they want to promote. And then suddenly you can watch the bright little light inside of the executive's eyes slowly go out, right? Because
Yeah.
we've gotten so deep into the weeds that we can't even express the business value, the excitement, or the impact to the company. You know, can you share with us, maybe you've experienced this too, Stefan, where you've walked in and you're like, oh my gosh, this was a brilliant idea and it just died on arrival because it didn't have the story to actually captivate the emotion to even make it into the portfolio of consideration.
I had a funny experience at AXA with a project that was called Bateau. BATAW, pronounced Bateau, French for boat.
Right?
Uh, Business anytime, anywhere, it was called. And the idea was, and it was a really clever idea, remote working. Why can't we all work remotely? Like,
What?
yeah,
Is that legal?
yeah, yeah. That was like, this will never work, kind of. You're sitting there, you're trying to explain the idea. People literally roll their eyes and say it will never work. Yeah.
Wow.
Interestingly, the most senior executives really believed in it. They really believed it was a
Interesting.
great idea. They were saying, my kids are talking to all their friends online. Why can't we do the same thing? And sorry. And yeah, technology-wise, it was a little bit challenging still. We're talking here about 2008, that time frame. So networks were not quite up to par yet. Networks would not work everywhere the same. Depending which cell phone providers you had different roaming agreements if you left the country. So two people from the US would meet in Saudi Arabia. One cell phone would work, the other one wouldn't because there was no
Ah,
support. Those type of things, yeah. So, but that was a typical like think it will never work. But it was an idea that never went away. But of
okay.
course, then when COVID came, it was like suddenly it worked. Well, it had a little bit of glitches, but I mean, for me, it's still amazing to see when you have to, how quickly you can make the change.
That's
And I
right.
wish, I wish with a lot of innovations that there is a triggering factor where you just simply say, it's like, you have to jump. You have to make it. You have to get it in place. It will work. Just jump, dare to jump. This like, no, I have concerns and there's a risk involved and our business may go down and all this kind of thing. No, just jump. Trust me. I said this
Yeah.
in an interview once, and he said, nobody will do something because you tell them, trust me. And I was like, trust me, they will. I'm convincing. I can convince people about this, but it was funny. Yeah, but you see, when people really have to, it will work.
That was my father's only advice to me before going on a date. If a boy says, trust me, say no, walk away. Never trust a man who says, trust me on the first date. That was the advice,
First
if
date.
I'm remembering it
Yeah,
correctly.
that's what good advice. First date,
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
probably happens the same in, because we are worried about our reputation, our reputational risk, right? We are worried about sticking our necks out. I think, there was someone who was referring to middle managers and innovation on the show, I remember, and they referred to the middle management permafrost
Yeah. Very
around
true.
innovation. That if you are, in your late 50s, right, you are pretty much at the top of your career. There's not a whole lot more to go, but you don't want to rock the boat by putting your innovation on the line, at this stage, your reputation on the line, rather, at this stage of your career, by taking a risk, because it could mean exiting early. It could mean losing your golden parachute. It could mean 1,000 other things. These are really challenging, um, you know, kind of, it feels like ice that you're breaking through in order to get people on board. Do you have any advice or secrets for folks who are feeling that stress or, about I just can't get this idea through.
I liked your comment about the permafrost. I
Mm,
think, and I think it's really, really true. I
mm.
think it's really, really true. There is senior management that usually has a very good long-term view, and they're very open to talk to. The problem that you have is in the middle. These people that are concerned about their jobs, are concerned about their reputation, as you said, permafrost is a perfect way to phrase it. My advice would always be go to the top, because you will not be able to get through the permafrost. At least it will be very, very difficult. They consider you the troublemaker. They consider you like the nuisance that they don't really want to deal with. They consider you like the guy with the crazy ideas and so on. And like Steve Jobs always said, I like the crazy ones. I like the troublemakers and so on. Yeah, you need to go to the top. You need to find a mentor that brings you there, and the top may say, it's like, hey, I like the idea, let's give it a try. You're much better off that way than fighting through something that can be very, very hard.
Yeah. Um, and you find that the project that you're working on gets a lot of yeses around the table, and your project just winds up getting slow rolled, as we called it. Yeah, that's really good. Let's try that next quarter. Yeah, let's revisit that. Or I'm going to need some more data. Do you think you can go back and get me some more analytics? I need some insights. Maybe we should talk to McKinsey about this idea. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but it gets thrown into a research project, right? That will never see the light of day.
Yeah, I've seen that. Like things like, oh, can you please put your idea into a spreadsheet? I would like to have it like that many columns, and I would like to have it this detail and whatever. And you're just basically busy filling out a spreadsheet, yeah, that nobody's really interested in, or that doesn't really say much. And then it's like, yeah, okay, fine, I got this spreadsheet. So what do I do with it? Let's file it. We revisit
And
it
you just
next
said it,
year.
Stefan. I love the way you said it. Can you put your idea into an Excel spreadsheet, right? You're like, I don't know. Did they ask Gandhi to put his idea into an Excel spreadsheet? Did Steve Jobs make a spreadsheet for the iPhone? Maybe one of his engineers did. But wait, just the concept of saying, can you put your idea into an Excel sheet is like the most literally putting your idea in a box, right? For those who are
Yeah.
supposed to be thinking outside the box. Like it's just
Yeah, no, it's crazy, crazy when you see what is happening. But you see, what I also see is like cost. Eventually, every company will face cost pressures. I mean, companies need to engage. They need to become innovative. They need to continue. They need to develop. If they stop growing, if they stop innovation, then they won't be around much longer. Even Jeff Bezos said at some point, if Amazon wouldn't continue to develop itself at a rapid pace, it will not exist. Um, so, yeah, at some point, there's always the opportunity to bring innovation to any organization. Sometimes the timing is a little bit off, especially if the organization is doing really well. It's kind of like, why do we want to change? Well, we want to prepare to something that we need to change early, because by the time we understand we need to change, it may be too late to develop the innovation at that point. So innovation needs to be always high on the agenda.
right. Well, Stefan, this has just been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I now need to ask you the three hot seat questions we ask everybody who comes on the show. So,
Okay.
number one, what is the greatest innovation of all time?
Of all time.
Mm.
I don't know. I think space travel. I have to say this. I'm a rocket scientist.
This is how we started this conversation, right? We started with the dreams of Apollo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Rocket ships. Love it. Number two is if you had the opportunity to join any innovation team in the course of human history, which team would you have joined?
Well, I go back to the space travel also in
Yeah.
this case. There's actually, I would say the computer on the moon lander was like the
Mm.
most craziest challenge ever. MIT developed it. most brilliant minds you can imagine, you know. And the other thing that was apparently very complicated were the suits for the astronauts, you know. Extremely difficult challenge at the time to develop something that stays flexible at very cold temperatures, that cools people enough in the direct sunlight in space, you know, that needs to be water and airtight. Um, it was a very complicated, very complicated thing, because it also had to be light so people could still move in it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And the last question is, what is something in the world that you wished existed that did not, that would make everyone's life better if it was created? So what is an innovation that you wish existed in the world? Something that drives you absolutely crazy, or something that would make you ridiculously happy, and the rest of us too.
I think I have to pass on that one. So people have answered this in the past, yeah?
Oh, yeah. The last one I heard on the show, which I thought was great, was the boarding process for an airplane. Can we just figure out how to board a commercial airplane without an annoyance? So these are the little things that annoy people, that people wish would be innovated. You know, even just going to if I never have to go to the post office again, every time I go there, I have 1,000 ideas of how to innovate the post office. And I have to leave here. I'm just going to buy my stamps and go.
Come to Switzerland. You learn something. Post office is one of the things that really works well.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's anyhow interesting to make the difference between the comparison between Switzerland and the US. You know, it's not that everything is perfect here, but certain things that
Just
don't work
work.
in the US so well, they work really well. Motor vehicle office, you know, it's like fly through kind of
Yeah.
experience, you know. So
Maybe even just the tax code, I think, in the United States would be amazing if we could clean that up. That would be a beautiful
yeah, the
thing.
taxes here are a few pages. Yeah, this is a great example. Yeah, especially when you live here and you're a citizen and you have to do both tax returns. That drives you definitely crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let you keep thinking about what's something you wish that you could innovate that hasn't been innovated yet, you know, and certainly some of my guests have said things like peace. Could we innovate the process of getting to peace, of finding peace, of finding equality, or even justice? Like, these are all good things that we would like to see innovated in our time.
Yeah, very true.
All right, I'm going to hold you to it next time you come back on the show.
Okay. Thanks very
Stefan, if
much.
people want to get in touch with you after hearing this fantastic conversation, where can they find you?
Oh, they find me on LinkedIn. It's probably easiest. There are a few Stefan Dietrichs around, but there's only one in Zurich. So
There
I
you
think
go.
so, at least. At least one that works at Siemens. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Stefan Dietrich, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.